Hey, everybody. Welcome to the TEConnect podcast. I'm John Martin.
And I'm Dean Riverman.
Dean, are you a do-it-yourself kind of guy?
Sometimes I am, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It depends on the project, but I generally do like to try to go after it myself. Now, I will admit, though, I had to replace a garbage disposal over the weekend. I did not do that myself this time around.
No?
It was just a little bit too complicated. Didn't want to get into the electric.
I've had
but
to do
otherwise,
that
I am
too,
a do-it-myself kind of guy.
I'm with you on the electric side of things.
Yeah,
That's the one thing. Like, I've installed some ceiling fans and lights here and there.
You don't want to mess with
a little
electricity.
nervous about that, frankly. Anything beyond that, I don't want to mess with.
That's right.
Well, what about in the business world? Are there things that you feel like it's okay to farm out and give, to others to do?
Yeah. That was quite the trend for a while. Still, it continues to be a trend about using third parties.
But there's also going to be times, though, when you do that and it's just not worth it.
That's true.
It's not worth the time. It's not worth the money. Doing something in-house might be a little better. Now,
this is true.
I know, what something we do, we have some freelance designers that we use.
That's right.
Occasionally. And I use something from time to time for an ebook. Actually, there's one. Her name's Caitlin. She's amazing.
Are you saying we're going to start outsourcing this podcast?
No, we're not going to do that because it's easier and better to do it in-house.
There it is. Yes.
There's a lot of time we might. I mean, you got to farm that out. You got to teach people what to talk about.
Right.
And,
it's just better to do it ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. Well, why not just keep it in-house to do it?
Fair enough.
So my reason for all of this.
Yes.
Because we're talking today about in-house color labeling.
Yes, nice.
And how it compares to doing third-partying. Third-party
so many advantages in color labeling, though.
Definitely. Yeah,
you can bring it in-house now.
And one of our guests today, Andy Scherz from Epson, has been on before talking about the benefits of color labeling.
That's right.
So today we've got him back, along with Mark Middendorf, also from Epson.
Nice.
To kind of talk about this compare and contrast of why you should be helping your customers bring it in-house.
Got it.
Hey, don't rely on someone third party. So we're going to do some compare and contrast around
all
pricing,
right, sir. Yep.
the reasons why you might want to, the benefits of in-house versus third party. Obviously, we're going to talk about the regulatory side of things. Because if you're doing color labeling in a business, it's probably because there's some regulation involved around it. Why it's, again, more important to do that internally. Talk about the waste factor, what's wasted when you use third party there. And then get into just maybe how VARs can help approach their customers about moving their business.
I like that
their
one.
color label printing business inside. Help convince them that they need to do this. And hey, maybe sell a Epson printer
along the way. No, get out.
Exactly.
Yes, I like it.
All that plus our usual value to the VAR. What's TEConnecting with us? It's time to plug in and get connected.
Welcome to the TEConnect podcast. It's time to get connected.
All right, as I mentioned, we have two fantastic guests with us today. First up, first time on the pod, Mark Middendorf. He is the go-to-market product manager for Epson ColorWorks. Mark, welcome to the show today. Tell us a little about yourself, how you got to your role. What's your day-to-day life like at Epson?
Yeah, good morning, John. I appreciate it, and Dean as well. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been in this business quite a while. Since 1999, I was part of the team at IBM that launched the first IBM-branded thermal label printer. So been around label printing and industrial printing a long time, and had the pleasure of joining, thanks to Andy and the team at Epson, had the pleasure of joining Epson about a little over a year ago. And let me tell you, it's been the most fun and exciting part of my career, because what we're talking about here today is something that is on the other end of that bell curve, right? And it's growing, it's on an acceleration path, and it's just super fun. So a little bit about me. I live in, honestly, the hottest place on earth, which is Lake Havasu City, Arizona. So it's just now starting to get below 100. My wife and I have 3 kids, and I just love spending time with them on the lake or whatever we do together. So yeah, that's kind of my life, and that's it. Happy to be here.
See, awesome. there you go. Living there, you can actually do research on label, viability in hot temperatures.
No doubt. Yeah.
Just stick them out on the back porch.
Me, it happens. All and UV, the ability to withstand UV. It's all done right here. And by the way, I did replace our garbage disposal, and maybe you did the right thing, having someone else do it.
Yeah. Mine was prone to leaking.
It's not easy.
It's not easy.
It's not easy at all.
And then you got to get the little ring. It's anyway to square up.
It's a bit of a nightmare.
Anyway,
our other guest today, Andy Scherz. He's a senior product manager for Epson. Andy, this is your third time on the show, I believe.
I believe so.
Yeah. So you're creeping ever closer to that elusive TEConnect jacket.
Yeah, the jacket
that somehow doesn't exist and never gets sent out to anybody.
We keep raising the number of how many shows you have to be on.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? Right,
yeah. With Cordy now, it's like, okay, you got to be on 20 to get it. Well, Andy, welcome back. We appreciate having you back on the show. What have you been up to since we last spoke to you about color labeling?
So the same thing, I mean, it's continuing. So we keep going into all kinds of new industries, new things keep popping up. So it's exciting. It's always interesting because it's just always something new that's becoming dominant in with our color label printers. So it's more application than you might even think about. So it's keeping me very, very busy.
There you go. Nice. All right. A couple of guys that know their stuff are excited about their stuff.
That's right.
Too.
That's right.
That's the best kind of guest. All right. Well, let's get into this. Let's start talking about this idea of, bringing color labeling in-house versus going out and using third-party pre-printed, folks or whatever.
Yep.
And let's start with, because I think an obvious comparison here of what to figure out is the pricing. Pricing, lead times, that's the stuff, that most people are going to think like, all right.
What's the cost?
Yeah. What does it cost me to go outside to do this versus if I do it inside? So help us out here. How does that compare, bringing in color labeling and printing inside versus outside? What are you looking at from a price and lead time perspective?
Okay. Well, the first and most simplest thing that people ask is, what's the cost of this one label compared to this one label? This is made inside, this made outside. And the truth is, we compare very favorably, right? So it's not as though we're kind of talking about, we know we buy it outside, but if we do it inside now, it's going to become wildly expensive. So in the simplistic term, we're right in where we need to be. These are business inkjet printers that are designed for production, so they have production costs in mind. And I think the big variable would be, how many is somebody making, right? So if they only need, 5,000, well, then probably the color label printing in-house is actually just flat out cheaper, right? But if they said, I need 500 million identical labels that will be shipped to me truckload month after month, well, maybe a pre-printed would be cheaper.
So here's another way to look at it. Guys, in preparation for this, Andy and I were looking at some prices just, that are out there to either get a third party or print in-house, right? So we're looking at a quote from third party to print something like maybe this right here. Okay. Basic 4x6 label, product label. And so here's what really stuck out to us. If you're printing 10,000, if you're getting 10,000 labels, which is really that magic number where the cost per label becomes economical. So if you're getting 10,000, then it's very close, like Andy said, to buying, a third party, printing in-house. Or let's say they only need 100. Let's say it's a pilot run. Guess how much that cost per label goes up? 40x.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay.
40x. So the difference between 10,000 to 100, 40 times the cost per label. That's why we're in this business and it's growing so fast, is because, customers that have a lot of SKUs, they're either buying 10,000 times all their SKUs at a minimum, or they're paying a premium per label.
Let's talk a little bit about flexibility too, as it relates to that, because I think that, what we're seeing in the marketplace is, the word of being able to privatize or personalize, the experience. And sometimes that breaks down to the label or I think companies feel the need to modify labels to keep up with design or, make sure that they're communicating what they need to communicate on the label. And, you get branding people and marketing people like myself involved. And we're going to want to change it like every 6 months.
Halloween. Shouldn't we be changing up the colors
exactly.
right now? Yeah.
So when you talk about lead times, right, if you're outsourcing it and printing it, your lead time's turning a little bit of an issue as it compares to in-house. Are you guys seeing some of that in the marketplace too? Just the flexibility that in-house is bringing and the demand for that? Is that part of the reason why we're seeing an uptick?
Yeah, so let's go right back to what Mark just said, and let's take what your theme is right there, which is actually, that is the industry theme. more micro targeting in the marketing, sub branding. It's not just ketchup with one grand brand. Now we have all kinds of, this is, people trying to make their things specialized and stuff like this. People trying different ways to reach their customers. Now, what Mark just said, though, is that how are you gonna, let's say, even talk about prototyping? How are you gonna prototype this? Okay, if you really need to buy 10,000, just 10,000 is where the outside label just suddenly becomes slightly economical. So you say, if I want to be nimble, I want to have all this micro branding, I want to do all this stuff, and yet every variation I got to at least bring in 10 or 20,000. And then I look at it in there and I say, you know what, this didn't look like what we really thought it should have looked like. That's in the trash, and it's another 20,000. Okay, so you got to think that I can't just get 50. I cannot print a little, sample run and let my marketing people take a look at it. Everything when I go outside is going to be this big production, and they got to make a lot to get the cost anywhere reasonable. Okay, and remember the second thing about that is it's very different if I have my printer sitting right next to me and I've got my graphic designer and we print it and we get it on the label. We go, oh, that doesn't look good, or that does look good. When you're ordering outside, you're basically making kind of a spec, and then you send it off into the ether to some other vendor, and you wait for the a couple of weeks for the stuff to come over. You see you don't like it, you got to start that process over and over again. So you're just nowhere near the speed of getting this thing done.
So here's another thing too, is what we're hearing more, and I've just a couple of the shows that I've been at recently, is more and more businesses are wanting to do exactly what you said, Dean. They want to personalize for different holidays, different times of the year, and that almost becomes economically infeasible when your cost per label is going up, let's say 10x or 20x, right? So with print on demand, businesses are saying, wow, I can personalize for a wedding, right? For special events, like really micro-focused events, and add a ton of value to their customers. And that's one way that this is really changing the game. It's the first time that it not only can they get a super high definition label that looks as good as something pre-print, but they can customize for any event or time of year or season.
Like I said, definitely hearing about the trend, but I wonder, guys, and I'd like to get your take on this. I don't know label printing as well as I maybe should, but is there a trade-off in the sense that ColorWorks, as great as it is, can produce certain types of labels, but are there I don't know, temperature sensitive labels or other types of labels that as nice as it would be to have that kind of flexibility of doing it in house, there's still some industries and whatnot that require certain specifications that is not really meant to be an in-house type of label, or am I completely wrong in that? In that ColorWorks really can do, or those types of products can do a lot of different things with different labels.
So I think you bring up an interesting point here. That as far as the function of the label, there isn't really anything that I can think of, that you cannot do with the color on-demand color labels. So, for example, we have extreme durability to harsh chemicals. So somebody's labeling something that if it spills on the label, it's highly caustic, but our labels are really quite bulletproof. Okay. And of course we have the, up to 1200 DPI resolution with variable droplet size that allows unimaginably precise shadings and fine text and everything like that. So there's not much that we can't do in the terms of function. So, whether it's a premium product or it's a legal regulatory label, probably we can handle all of it. But there are certain elements that people put on labels like foil stamping. Well, yeah, the printer can't actually do foil stamping. There's certain techniques like that, or there's some labels that actually have embossing, right? The printer cannot do embossing. However, I will point out that that doesn't mean we cannot do kind of a hybrid approach. Or somebody, if they really need a foil embellishment, okay, then order the foil embellishment on blank stock. The printer will print everything else. So yeah, there's not much we can't really do with the on-demand.
That's printer. Awesome. I appreciate you answering that, because I was just putting myself in the VAR shoes, and maybe they feel like they don't want to have the conversation around some of the labels because they feel like, oh well, that's got to be a specialized label. So
Right,
I wouldn't even want to have that conversation. But to your point, Andy, it's no, have the conversation.
Doesn't hurt to ask. Yeah.
Have the conversation. See if they're still viable to bring it in house, because maybe the print technology is not going to be the thing that's holding you back.
Right.
And then there's workarounds on other things. So that's good stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like just to kick off from the intro a little bit here. We had a little bit of talk about do-it-yourself and, the garbage disposal and should you touch something that has electrical stuff in it or not and everything like that. Well, one of the things I think about the printer that we're offering here, or that the latest state-of-the-art on-demand color printers, is that it isn't so complicated like replacing a garbage disposal. In fact, I think people are shocked that they take the printer, they take their Adobe Illustrator, and they're making beautiful labels like in 5 minutes. And they think it should be a hard thing, and then they realize, oh, you mean I just put the stock in and I hit print? And I go, that's all you do. It's really not complicated.
Really good point. Yeah,
definitely.
Good point.
Well, Andy, you mentioned a little bit about the regulatory side of things, and I know companies that have a lot of regulation, again, especially something related to chemicals, pharmaceuticals. I know there's other types of industries too, where regulation is a big deal, and the color aspect can be a big part of that too, sometimes because it's required and because it can also help things stand out and be different from your standard black and white label when you're trying to very effectively communicate some sort of regulatory compliance that your particular product or your shipment or whatever it is has. So talk to us about some of the industries that are impacted there. I know I kind of mentioned a couple, but I'm sure you have more examples, and how the in-house labeling can really make compliance easier for them versus going out third party.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about an industry that's a newly emerging industry like cannabis, right? So there's people that are trying to now, it's been legalized in many places, okay? But guess what? We have 50 different states, and I don't know how many different counties there are, and even there's cities, and they're all dictating content.
Yep, a lot of different compliance there.
And it's changing fast, okay? So what was Mark saying? If I'm ordering labels, unless I'm ordering high volumes of labels, my cost per label from an outside print shop is exorbitant. So if I order a high volume of labels and then they say, oh, by the way, Massachusetts now wants a little green leaf over this red icon with a 1 through 3 indicator, all that just became scrap. And so what we find is that, the regulations are changing constantly because the regulations are designed by people thinking up of regulations. And each time you modify that, you just kill all the preprint that somebody just ordered.
Yeah, I mean, this is regulated labeling is honestly the most prime for print on demand, because whether it's cannabis, chemical, medical, any industry that requires regulation, it's getting to the point that it's almost impossible to do everything pre-print. One of the processes, John and Dean, that was used a lot with chemical was what's called a two-step, right? So businesses would buy a pre-print label with the pre-print color elements and then run it through a traditional label printer to print the black, the variable data, right? But there again, the problem lies. Every time a regulation changes, that just becomes a waste. Andy and I were literally at a show a couple weeks ago in Las Vegas, and we had a customer come in the booth that said they just had to throw out $200,000 of media because a regulation changed and they weren't printing on demand. And that's why they were in our booth, because they said, we cannot allow this to continue, right? So this is real. This happens. And it's setting up this, I like to say, the perfect storm with the lead times, the regulation, the demand or the desire for businesses to kind of own their own destiny. It's all leading towards the ability to print on demand. And now the technology, thanks to Epson, is finally there to empower these businesses to take that step.
What an interesting commentary, right? I mean, here you have a bunch of people who think they're doing good, I guess, through regulations and stuff like that. You hear it from business owners all the time, how undeniably frustrating it is to be regulated and have to address. And here's a real world example, right? You've got hundreds of thousands of dollars of labels that you've invested in, and oh, by the way, it's all garbage because we've changed this regulation in one way. And there's a lot of different industries. I mean, you rattled off a couple of them, Mark, but it's food, bev, cosmetics and personal care, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, medical devices. I mean, there's a lot of industries that have regulation around it, and to the point, the need to be much more flexible in light of what's happening via legal or regulations or things of that nature. Really fascinating.
Yeah, and I know we mentioned cannabis, obviously, because it's still very Wild West, and there's no standardization from, Andy, you mentioned state to state, county to county, city to city sometimes.
Yeah, right.
I've done some marketing campaigns around this and around the labeling part of it. And you're right. Every time I look at it, I'm like, good grief. Like, you can go find a list of every single state of exactly what's different for every single one of them. So if you're operating a business that's crossing state lines, you have completely different labeling practices there.
Yeah.
But I think even if you take that aside and get into the industries, that maybe have, standardized regulations like chemical processes or pharmaceuticals or whatever, where it's, maybe a national standardization. Even that, though, it's still not easy because, to your point, changes happen on a regular basis. They're always reevaluating this stuff. Those labels have to be very, very precise and have a lot of precise, detailed information. And as soon as you find something wrong, again, you might have to scrap an entire thing, or a dramatic change might occur. And I'm sure this happens a lot, and because I know what regulatory bodies are like, where they don't let you know that this stuff's coming down the pike necessarily. They might be discussing it, and then one day they just flip a switch and say, oh, by the way, by within 3 weeks, by the end of the quarter, you need to change up all your labeling in order to have this particular new little yellow widget in the corner in order to verify this. So I can definitely see how. Mark, to your point, this is the low-hanging fruit, I feel like, for VARs. If you're working with any of these companies that are doing this kind of regulatory labeling, that there's these requirements, there's no reason they shouldn't be doing this in-house. So we'll get to this in a moment of where to start with VARs and what they should be going out and doing. But I think this is a very low-hanging fruit. If you've got these kind of customers, those are conversations you should probably be having sooner than later about bringing their printing in-house if they're not already. Well, let's pivot here real quick, because we mentioned this a little bit earlier. Andy, you kind of hinted about the waste factor here, and you guys both have mentioned it here that especially if you're asking for large sheets of labels and you get them back, and then suddenly you've got to make some changes, or if something is completely changed where they no longer are viable. What are we dealing with there on the third party side? Do these pre-printed suppliers, do a lot of them still have like minimum order requirements where even if you wanted to order from them, they're saying like, hey, you can't just get 500 labels from us. We need you to order 1,000 at a time. So even if you only need 500, you're going to get 1,000, and hopefully you use that other 500 at some other time, or you're just out of luck. Is that still happening? And then also, what does happen when, situations occur, like you mentioned earlier, like these, if a misprint happens or if some other kind of issues going on, like are our customers just, are they eating the cost of that stuff and just dealing with it because maybe they didn't give the right info, or those third parties taking any responsibility for that? So give us a little insight into the wasteful side of things here.
Well, if I, basically you're going to get a chance. You're going to send a little request over to Label House, and they're going to deliver what you asked for. Okay. Then when you get it, you realize, oh, I needed a little red icon over here. Well, that's not the label producer's problem. Okay. So, you told me to make you a chocolate cake with pink frosting. There's a chocolate cake with pink frosting. Now, the fact you don't like the way that looks, or you think it tastes bad, that's your problem. Okay. And so, fundamentally the manufacturer that's ordering the labels has to just eat all these things. Obviously if there's a true misprint, like it just was done something, the printing press had a failure. Well, that's on the label supplier, but that's not normally the problem. Normally, what the problem is going to be is that some of the content changed, or the person ordering labels is unhappy with the way it looks. Didn't look, when you actually saw it, it didn't look like what they had in their mind, or there's something has changed about it. They have to eat all that, and it just gets baked into the cost. So one of our opening questions here was the cost. And let's say we said, well, okay, this one's a 10 cents a label, and even this one preprint is 10 cents a label, so it's equal, right? It's equal. But when you throw away $200,000 of labels, you got to add that back in. So suddenly that equal isn't really equal. It was 10 cents for this way, and it's 30 cents for this way, because when you factor in that waste, right? And even I have to buy 10,000. So you ask, well, can I give you 500? Sure, they'll give you 500 for the price of 10,000. Because the problem is their machine is designed to produce a lot, and it takes a lot of setup. They have to charge you one way or the other for that setup. Either they amortize it over 10,000 labels, or they amortize it over 500. But you're gonna pay it either way. Okay, so they'll give you whatever quantity you want. You can ask them for one. It's probably one for the price of 10,000, right? Uh, you know, so the bottom line is, if you have your buyer, they're always going to order too many labels, very simply, right? Because they want to get the price break, because the mentality is, I got to get this price per label down, and then you just have a warehouse full of all this unused stock that you got to save yourself money. You spent the money to save money somehow in some strange dynamic.
So John and Dean, so Andy and I, we've been at this a little bit, and we've seen countless cases where there's racks as wide as my house with rolls and rolls of pre-print media, and without fail, on those racks, there's a certain portion of that is literally unusable. Why? Because there's a shelf life. And it's typically around 2 years. It depends on the environment, the humidity, the heat. If it's in Arizona, trust me, that shelf life is going to be a lot less, but there's a shelf life. And so that's what happens too, is they buy the big volumes to get that cost per label down, but then they don't use it all. It becomes waste. Something changes. And here's one other thing I'm going to throw out, and you guys can appreciate this. Being in marketing, I spent much of my career in marketing. Well, marketing, we love to tweak things, right? Hey, we can make this a little bit better. We can move this here, and it's constantly happening in brochures and revisions. Well, as Andy just said, when that happens, all that preprint just goes to waste, right? To implement any design change. So it's creating the perfect storm for customers that they walk in our booth, they see they can print a beautiful high-res color label for, let's say, 10 cents all in. They honestly cannot believe it. I don't know how else to say it. They can't believe it because they're used to dealing with buying this high volume. And think about this too. It's not just the cost per label. They're paying someone to procure all those labels. They're paying someone to receive them, unpack them, put them on a shelf somewhere. They're paying for that floor space, right? It's the big picture of what's that really costing that business.
Yeah, for sure. Let's go down an angle of the ESG, not to bring it out, but I know it's becoming even more prevalent, in industry and manufacturing and just, corporate policy, to have an environmental, social, and governance kind of policy. And a lot of manufacturers, not just media or whatever, are starting to deploy tactics of quantifying,
Right.
Like, hey, if you put in a ColorWorks, and I don't know, I'm picking on you because you're here, but the analogy would be, if you put in a ColorWorks, it's going to have this much of a positive impact on the environmental, your environmental footprint, because it's just in time printing, and so there, your waste is going down X or whatnot. Have you guys gotten there? Are you trying to develop those types of arguments, as far as why you should consider a ColorWorks product, or is that coming down the future? Not to put you on the spot, but you know where I'm going.
If you look at the our parent company Epson, for example, is extremely environmentally conscious. Okay, and that's a major tenet of the philosophy to integrate with the world in a harmonious fashion, right? And so that's why our printers, for example, happen to be extremely low power, amongst other things. So the power footprint of this technology is really low. But we've seen all kinds of people concerned. We have people that they don't want the paper bags in the grocery store, right? Because you use the bag and you're throwing away, and it came from paper, and paper is a pretty energy intensive process that chops down trees and all that. So people are very concerned about paper waste. Okay, of course, people then think, well, of course, what do we do with our paper bags? We recycle it, right? But guess what? Label stock is not so easy to recycle, because you've got this media with a liner and glue on it. And, most of the if you have a roll of old labels that you never used, most likely just the trash bin is its home, right? So, yeah, so, it's a vastly greener thing to just buy a few rolls of blank media and then turn it into whatever you need just when you need it. And you're just, we used to have a term we called it just-in-time color. Like, in other words, it's a very lean supply chain thing. So it's not a supply chain full of waste, right? I mean, even if you go back to the when you order the preprint labels, to get it started, if you see one of these machines, they're huge. They have to thread so much media through that machine just to get it set up, and then to do the first trial run. You'd be shocked how much waste is going to come off that machine. What is the waste of the ColorWorks little on-demand printer? Pretty much it will print on the very first label and the very last label. It's nearly 100% utilization. So yeah, I think it's a powerful message there. And I think it's becoming, especially our comrades in Europe, they're really getting, a lot of focus on that. So yeah, it's all up and down the spectrum. Even the inks we use are very safe and environmentally conscious and everything like that. So that what you print on, and we get asked by that. So in fact, we were just at a show, Mark and I, and people were asking about what's in the ink. Like, is this something bad on this label to throw away? I said, no, it's not. So yeah, it's definitely becoming a bigger and bigger thing.
I agree with you, Andy. That's kind of why I brought it up. I mean, we're getting asked a lot more about it. I think that VARs should become a little bit more savvy about weaving that into their conversation. I think Mark's example, and yes, we've had the example in our warehouse of skids of product that we're housing, on behalf of customers, that, something changes and whoop, now all that stuff, and there's nothing you can do with it but throw it away. Right. You can't recycle it. It's not a recyclable type of material. So
not something anyone else can really use, potentially. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So,
hey, would you like our pre-printed labels that are specific to us and our company and our products? Like, no, I don't need these. Yeah. They don't help me. Yeah.
No, really, pennies on the dollar? No. Yeah. I don't even. So
even then, yeah.
It's a viable part of the conversation to get into, and to me, that's just one of these advantages of this ColorWorks on-demand kind of color label printing world, is the ability to lower footprints in a lot of different ways as it relates to the environment, which is becoming more and more important. Especially the younger the generation that's in the conversation, way more important.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Anyway,
and to your point, more and more companies are simply making it part of their brand, their statement, their feeling, and honestly, they're more and more of them are going to start asking. Their customers about it. They're going to start bringing up that part of the conversation.
Well, I think you just heard Andy say,
you have to have that part as part of your conversation.
That's right.
You got to be ready to answer those questions. If someone comes to you and says, "Hey, how does buying from you help me out with my ESG compliance?"
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You might lose out to the company that can say, "Oh, well, hey, because we work with Epson, and Epson is committed to doing this and that, and
that's right.
Here's how we're going to save you money, and save you waste, So
that's it.
Good stuff there. All right, well then, so let's wrap this up, the main conversation here, by talking about getting back to VAR's approach to their existing customers.
Yeah.
Going out and talking to them. I'm sure there are still going to be some folks, unfortunately, that are a little skeptical about this because, maybe they're price chasers. Maybe they're just like, hey, I've worked out some deals where I buy X amount, I get this much. I'm pretty sure I can't replicate that by doing that in-house. Maybe they're just really not interested in it. Maybe they just like, hey, I don't want to have to try to pivot our operations to figure out how to do this in-house. We've got a third party doing it for us. So, how do you respond to that kind of, maybe disinterest and skepticism? How would you recommend that VARs approach customers about having these conversations? And do you have any kind of best practices or success stories that you could share with them that maybe they can go out and use and share with their customers too?
So I'll say that, I'll kick it off here, that in my PowerPoints, that when I'm going out doing, VAR training or even talking with end users, the one slides that always gets everybody suddenly looking up their seats is I show, like Mark talked about, these racks of labels. Okay. And when you show that rack of labels and you show that inventory, this is what it gets their attention, right? So I always recommend to the VAR, go in there and Let the customer tell you how they do it today and get to that room where all those labels are in. Let them talk. They're going to start telling you, well, yeah, we got to order, we got to do this, we got to buy this minimum thing, they got to talk about throwaway. You know, you're especially depending on, well, I don't even care what size of business you are. That's a lot of capital tied up in labels, right? And that lets people start thinking about the problem. I think that people begin to actually almost sell themselves on the product when they start looking at the hassle of what they're doing today and they start talking through it. So the best thing to do for the VAR is just get yourself in that room and let the customer start talking. And I think they're going to paint the picture why they need an on-demand solution, because it's not an easy thing. Like Mark said, you're paying people to manage it. You're ordering, you got lead times, you got waste, you know what you're throwing away. You don't know what you got. You thought you had it. Now you go to produce it and you didn't have it. Now you're doing a rush order. Let them, again, you focus on their pain point, and that's where their pain point is at.
So that's step number one. So this is good stuff, guys. So step number one is what Andy just took through. Okay. Step number two, and sometimes these steps don't go in the same order, because if it's someone comes into our booth, for example, I love it when we're at a show, someone comes into our booth, we're printing something like this, right? It's got live imagery on the side. It's very detailed, very deep. They see it coming out of our printer. Half the time, they honestly can't believe it. They've got to lift up the cover to see, are we really printing on blank media? Okay, so that's step number two, is they've got to see samples. And we can provide, or our VARs are the ones, right? They provide samples on all types of media, mattes, polys, high gloss, I mean, you name it, foils. So that's step two. But then guess what? They see it, they love it. What's the next question? Guys, what's the next question they're going to ask?
How much?
How much, right? So they're sold. The fish is on the line. The next thing is how much. This is what really, and Andy can attest to this way more than I, is how many times has this really driven the deal home? When they see that total cost, right? We have an in-cost calculator that's very precise, can tell them with a very high degree of precision how many thousands of labels per 4 colors that they're going to be able to get, printing that label, and they see what that total in cost is per label. I've seen it with my own eyes. They literally are like, wow, how could I have been buying and having all these headaches for all these years, buying pre-print, and now I can do it on demand for maybe the same per label cost, or sometimes less, without all that headache. Complete game changer. So that's step 1, 2, 3. That's it right there.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, and I think there's a very good point there too, because we talk about these third-party, companies, print companies, and most of them are probably dealing with large industrial machines doing all this printing for them, because they're doing such large orders.
Absolutely.
And if you're someone, if you've been working with these folks, maybe they brought you out there to tour the facility to kind of convince you to come on board. They're like, hey, take a look at what we do here and how this works. Maybe they looked at all that and thought, oh, wow, this is a massive, huge business here.
Yeah.
And when you're telling them, oh, you can do that in-house, they're like, no, I can't. I've seen what they work with. I don't. Are you telling me your little desktop printer over here can do what they're doing? No, they can't do that.
Right.
But to your point, you show them. Sometimes it's just a matter of like, hey, let me show you what we can actually do. Like you said, maybe they lift that lid and think there's like little magic elves in there doing the work or something, and they realize like, no, this can really do it. And that you're right. Sometimes it's just a matter of the show not tell, where you get someone to see what can actually be done and what can happen, what they can do, and how easy it is, can completely change their impression and picture about this, and maybe erase some of that skepticism and that disinterest that they've had because they just assumed it was something
too big.
that it is that it is actually not. Yeah, something they could not possibly bring in house. So. All right, great stuff. Yeah. All right,
John, I gotta say, hey, John, I just gotta say that point was so good, because we've had customers literally tell us they can't believe the machine is so small. They're like, I was thinking it would be. This happened to me just recently. I was doing a training, and they're like, how big is the machine? I pointed my camera down, right, to see the one right on my desk here. They're like, No way. Yeah. Yes way. Right. They were thinking it was this big, right?
What's on the other side of the wall?
Yeah.
That point you brought up is so valid. Anyway, back to you.
All right. Well, hey, before we wrap up here with our value to the VAR, let's let these guys tell you a little bit more about how Epson in particular is helping out here. If you haven't heard enough of that by now,
right.
Well, we'll condense it even further for you to tell you how they can help you go out and win some in-house color labeling business.
Nice.
But as always, we like to thank our sponsors here on the TEConnect podcast. Thank you so much to Epson, who sponsors our TEConnect program.
Yep.
We appreciate what you guys do for us for our program with our ISVs, as well as the support that you're giving to our podcast.
Absolutely.
Hey, if you like the show, you got to tell us.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're listening to this podcast on a regular basis, maybe if this is even just your first time, it's always nice to just give us a little validation, not for our sakes, but because you letting us know that you like us helps other people know that they should be checking this out.
That's right. That's right.
So if you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button, smash that subscribe button, subscribe to our channel. There's lots of other good stuff that we do on BlueStar's YouTube channel. If you're listening on the podcaster of your choice, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever, if there's an opportunity to leave a rating or review, please do that. I'd love to see some of those reviews, even if it's just a quick, note saying, hey, like what you guys are doing, keep it up.
There you go.
And as always, we need to know what you want to hear about and talk about on the podcast. So we need to hear that from you. Maybe there's a certain type of guest you want to hear from, a certain vendor you want to hear from, a certain topic particular to you and your business. Maybe you're just like, hey, I want Andy and Mark to come back on and talk some more about color labeling in this context. Just tell us. We don't know if you don't tell us.
You got to let us know. Yep.
So there's always a link in the show notes where you can send in submissions, ideas for the podcast. Just for sending those in, we will send you a TEConnect podcast t-shirt.
There you go. Boom.
That's
and
it.
a new one at that, right?
A new one at
newly
that, yes.
designed.
We are
yes.
newly designing some for the new year. So if you do it right now, you may have to wait a couple months before you get it, but I promise it will pay off when you eventually get that nice, soft, cool t-shirt.
Soft.
Wear
Yes.
around.
Yes.
And as always, if you want to connect with us directly, you can find us on X/Twitter at TEConnectPod. You can also email us, TEConnect@BlueStarInc.com. All right, let's wrap up our conversation. Let's talk about a little VAR value here.
Yes.
And again, I feel like most of this conversation has been a lot of good talking points for VARs, a lot of helping them understand how they can go out and pull this business back in-house and away from these third parties. But let's wrap it up here by talking about Epson in particular, because you guys have been very, very proactive about color labeling. We've had Andy on a few times talking about this topic. It's, ColorWorks, I know, is a big part of your product line and what you do, and for good reason, because obviously, you're kind of moving the mark here about what can be done in-house. Tell us how you help VARs that go out and address some of these issues we've discussed today. How's Epson in particular going to help them through having these conversations and getting their customers to in-house color label printing?
So one of the things is we do a lot of education. Right. So we do events like this. We also do a lot of training. And one of the things we try to do is expand the VAR's visibility or horizon of what this opportunity is. Okay. What is always amazing when I do a VAR training, and I think Mark would have a similar sentiment, is, you sit there and you think like color printers. And in fact, when you talk about what kind of printer the end user normally had, it was a monochrome printer because almost always, even if they're using preprint, they still have to do some printing in-house. It's not as though they don't have any printing in-house. It's just they always only did what they call the variable print, the black and white. Okay. And so, so they think about that. And what's always shocking is when I start talking about all the different ways that colors can actually enhance the business usage. So, there's pretty labels that might go on a product, but there's also just functional labels like color coding a warehouse or highlighting a certain warning or making the certain pieces of information stand out so they reduce errors. And you start showing all these different dynamics and you watch the faces in the crowd light up. And usually when we start talking to the VARs, whatever was supposed to be an hour meeting becomes a 2-hour meeting because they're impressed and shocked by all the different applications. So one of the ways we do it is actually expand their horizons with this whole diversity of things they can do. It's more than they expected.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, I do a lot of trainings as well, all over the country for VARs, and going through all those use cases, they're sitting back in their chair at the end like, wow, like I honestly didn't think of half of those, and that's what makes it so fun. And that's really what we invest a lot of time, a lot of energy in training, equipping, because to us, and this is fundamental with Epson as a company, is a partnership. We're all about the partnership. And that's why we sincerely value what you guys are doing and the opportunity to be on this, because it demonstrates a partnership that we have with you and with our VAR community, because we need to be a part of that ecosystem. And I want to just show another example here. I mean, in terms of like thinking outside the box, this is something we're working on now called Label Boost, that you take something as basic as a shipping label. Well, what about the ability to include the required, battery info and a promo at the bottom, right? I mean, this is game-changing stuff. That
a color promo at that sticks out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. This is stuff that customers don't know what they don't know. They're not thinking in this dimension. So it takes our VAR, someone at one of our VARs, to go in and turn on that light bulb, right? To start that discussion. And that's what is so fun about this business. So yeah, we invest a lot in making sure our VARs have the information that they need to be successful.
All right, so here's my curveball to you guys. What are your top 3 verticals, industries, or whatever that you're seeing growth from a color label perspective? I mean, is it cannabis? Is cannabis one of the top 3? So if I'm a reseller sitting back and thinking to myself, okay, I know my customer base, what are some of the ones that are kind of taking off on the color label side? Do you guys have an opinion there? Just like the top 1, 2, 3?
Yeah, well, one of them continues to be strong is of course the chemical industry, because they require color warning. So it's what I call legally mandated variable color. So it's not like just a color element. It's some variable number of color elements that you don't necessarily know, and it's not necessarily consistent. Even I'm making chemical X, every different state has a threshold that whether this warning is required or not required, blah, blah, blah. So chemical, always continues to be big. The second one is picture on a label. Okay? So, started kicking off this conversation about home improvement. I'm kind of like a black belt of home improvement. And I've been going to these big do-it-yourself stores for a long time. And they used to write on the boxes what's inside, right? They say this is a half-inch PVC, blah, blah, blah. And if you read it, even your native English reader, it takes you forever to find this stuff. Go into it now. Every single box has a picture of what's in that box. And they'll even color code the size of what's in that box, right? So the fact that you have high resolution on demand that can produce a picture, go look around and you will see pictures of what's inside the box on the product label. So that's a big, big one.
Yeah, and think of this. There's thousands and thousands of SKUs. That's where this is going, right? I mean, you have hardware, you have fittings. You can't even count the different types of fittings that are out there, right? To do all this pre-print is an astronomical task when it comes to things like hardware, fittings, fixtures. So that definitely is another one. So Andy, you've called 2 there. Do you have a third one there?
Well, and then again, it is then I'm going to call, we refer to the term as like boutique label. What we're talking about are, it used to be kind of like you had one brand of ketchup, you had one brand of this, you had a couple big major brands of coffee. But, look at beer, you had your Budweiser. Now it becomes the microbrew section. So everything is becoming more specialized. This is a special herbal tea, coffees, there's so many types of coffees, both regional and variations. All that stuff starts becoming impractical to label in bulk because it's not bulk product, right? So that all these, I'll call them, more segmented manufacturers trying to reach their customers with more individualized products is blowing the lid off this thing, because it's too hard to do those kind of labeling with the preprint.
Mark, you got 3?
And hey, I was gonna throw in a bonus one, because those really, Andy really did cover the top 3, but the bonus one I'm going to throw out is visitor management. And just within the last few weeks, we've had some massive opportunities come to us, large businesses, right, that want to have a full color guest badge. And get this, this is something pretty cool that came just to me recently and I was working on yesterday. A badge that actually has a something in the material that will say void after 12 hours. That kind of technology is out there. And so it allows the badge with a full color image of the person to be printed on our printer. And then after 12 hours, there's a section that shows up as void. This is cool stuff because security is front and center for everyone, whether it's businesses, universities, schools. So visitor management is another big one, both for that application and trade shows, because you think of the waste that happens at a trade show, right? With all this preprint stock. Now, most of the shows you go to are all print, like this one here, printed on our printers on demand, right? It's so much more environmentally friendly. So anyway, that's your bonus one.
I like the bonus one. Yeah. I'm so glad Andy brought up breweries, because I was looking for a reason for our resellers to go to a brewery, and now we got it. Color label.
Sell some printers and maybe do a little sampling while you're there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We love it.
Yeah, we love it. That's it.
I like it. All right, great stuff. Yeah, and I very much appreciate the idea of a little outside of the box thinking too. Like, hey, it doesn't have to be just all about your standard labeling on shipments or whatever, that it can be stuff right. In-house too.
Yep.
And, and the visitor manager, I think, is a perfect example of that. And I've actually been to a company before that had that kind of like that fade in kind of label where you put it on and like, I think it was like a little stop sign or something. And if you wore it for more than a day or something, or if you had it, around for more than a day, a stop sign appeared in the background.
That's kind of cool.
There before,
yeah,
just to indicate like, hey, you've been here for too long, or
get out,
or you shouldn't be back here. Yes, this is an old label. So I like that kind of stuff. All right, hey, let's wrap up here then with our favorite segment each week. What's TEConnecting with you?
Yes.
This is where we get to talk about something in the world of technology, innovation, science, business. It's just something we feel like chatting about today. It's caught our eye, has our attention.
All right,
Mark, I'll let you kick this one off. What's TEConnecting with you right now?
All right, so one of the things, and Andy and I were chatting about this last night. Like, okay, what's out there, right? Well, one of the things that is super, super cool right now, and it just happens to be relevant, is cloud printing, right? Not something we think about or talk about a lot, but cloud printing in the sense of, John, not just, hey, we're sending data from the cloud to a print server and then it's got to be routed to a printer. I'm talking about direct cloud to a printer. This is cool stuff when you really think about it. And, even 5 years ago, who would have really thought something like this would have been possible or widely used? So anyway, I'm going to ask Andy, he was actually doing this live recently, and it drives the point home that the beauty of combining a technology like color on demand with the ability to now print to the printer directly from the cloud, that's really cool stuff. That really changes the dynamic.
I'd like to touch on it. So, we talked about how far we go back in technology, it used to be just to connect your printer was this whole weird thing. Do you have an IEEE 1288 port, which nobody on this podcast probably even knows what it means, or a coax connector or a Twinic? And I mean, it was like this very dedicated, weird, complicated infrastructure, blah, blah, blah. And it was to one piece of equipment to another piece of equipment. And with this cloud thing, all of a sudden, we had an account. We were talking with a software developer in Sylvania. I happened to be out here in California. We had another group in Ohio, and then we had another manager over in Pennsylvania. And then we were all working and looking at the same printer. And then the guy in Sylvania says, yeah, I can see it's online. And then somebody else says, okay, let me try setting a label to it. And it was like, it really was. It was just like I realized we're just at a whole nother threshold here as all this stuff becomes, kind of like, the Internet of Things, if you will. It's really just amazing that it would be inconceivable as a younger me to ever think that you could do something like that.
Yeah, pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
Andy, did you have?
Yeah, I grew up in the days of IBM where coax connector was as big as a coffee cup, right? I mean, it's just crazy that we've gone from that to hey, you can send a job to a printer in another country directly from the cloud. It's crazy.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. Andy, did you have another TEConnecting for yourself, or is this a shared one for you guys?
I mean, it's just that same concept, that this ability to have devices accessed by the web, and how you can access it. So, I was, in my personal life, I was out with some friends, and then they said, hey, let's go back and sit in your spa. How long will it take to heat up? And I just pulled my phone out. I said, well, let me just turn it on. Right? It really is it's really, emerging sharply how you can just do all this stuff right now, which was going to open up a whole new level of power in these
Hey,
technologies.
Andy, what about the downside when your network goes down? Tell about that. I mean, right, all of a sudden you don't have your climate control, right, everything.
So, our router went out, and I realized, holy cow, I think we have like 20 devices on that router, right? You don't even realize how connected everything is, right? Your ring and this and that. So it's a blessing and a curse, I guess.
Yeah, we got back from our trip this weekend, and I saw a notification that said that our internet had been down for like 2.5 days.
Oh wow, okay.
I was like, all right, well, I wasn't there for that to be a problem for me apparently, but I would have been miserable had I actually been there. So
Right.
oh, there you go. All right, well, what's TEConnecting with you, Dean?
Well, I got one thing here. One place that you really don't want to be anymore would be the International Space Station. Here's the
Is it
headline.
finally falling apart?
Oh, yeah.
Officially?
International Space Station reportedly suffered its third coolant leak from a Russian-made laboratory module over the past year. So apparently all these Russian modules are starting to fall apart and they're leaking coolant. But just like you would think, right? So they noticed that there was some type of a leak occurring on the cameras outside. And so what does NASA
Is anybody
do?
even up there right now?
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah. There's somebody up there. And so what does NASA do? They put in the call to the people that are up there and say, hey, by the way, can you guys look out the window real quick? Because we see flakes, quote unquote, coming from one of the two radiators of the multi-purpose laboratory. Man, dude, I'm telling you, there's no way I'd go up there because, it's obvious it was a combo thing, right? The Russians were up there too. But, Putin just said he's dedicating all his dollars towards making ammunition and stuff like that for the war.
Right.
I mean, the ISS has got to be like the furthest thing from their mind. I don't know.
All of a sudden, this is low on the priority list, right?
Really low on the priority list. And it's if it's leaking all over the place, dude, I'm not going.
It's like having that roommate that just stopped doing laundry and cleaning up after themselves. We're like, nope.
Yeah, not doing it.
Not going to do it. I'm paying the rent, but that's it. Yeah.
That's right. So if you get an invitation to go to the ISS, just turn it down.
I don't think I'm going to, for one thing, but yeah.
Even if it's a color label opportunity, you need to turn that down.
Well, here's what you can do is you can tell your customer if they do have any of that excess labels laying around and they can't use anymore, maybe they can ship them to NASA.
Oh, to patch the leaks?
Yeah, so they can send it up there and start patching stuff, like.
What do you think of that, Andy?
Get some benefit out of them. I don't know. Like, look, pennies for the label here.
Yeah.
You can patch up some holes on the ISS.
It's good for our ESG, right?
Yeah, you never know. NASA might be desperate.
Good way to recycle those labels.
That's it.
Exactly.
John, what's TEConnecting with you?
All right. So apparently crabs are here to save the day.
Crabs?
Yeah, they're like
little crabs coming out of the ocean?
As this article from Vox indicates, not all heroes wear crabs. Not all heroes wear capes. Sorry, I just totally botched that. Some are crabs. So apparently there's a movement going on in Florida where scientists are getting ready to unleash masses of crabs to assist with the coral reef problem there.
Oh.
So as they note in the article here, that like about half of the world's corals have been wiped out due to warming seas, disease, other
bleaching,
threats.
all that.
All this kind of stuff. And just our various trash that we're always dumping in the oceans. And apparently 90% of the coral reef in Florida is already deteriorated. So this problem keeps accelerating. There was a big heat wave in the Caribbean that did not help out, apparently.
That's right. Yep.
So now, like as a method to help out, because a lot of what's going on here is algae is the big part of the problem. Apparently.
Okay. All right.
This algae, which feeds off of the kind of trash and waste
right.
and stuff that we're dumping into the ocean and gets bigger itself, is starting to cloy onto these reefs. It's destroying them. It's keeping them from getting sunlight. and it's making them useless. And if you don't know, coral reefs have served multiple functions. One of them being it's great for a lot of sea wildlife.
Yeah.
And a lot of the fish that
Diversity
we might be fishing and using it ourselves.
Just watch Nemo.
Wildlife.
Finding
exactly.
Nemo. Yeah.
As well as, especially in Florida, a lot of those reefs were helping shore up the shorelines for devastating storms and hurricanes to keep from flooding being quite as massive. So
what are the crabs going to do?
See why we'd have a problem. Well, apparently,
what do they do?
These particular crabs, and I do not have the name of them off the top of my head you're looking at here, but these particular crabs apparently feast on algae. Like, I'm talking like serious feasting.
Got it.
Just consume algae at massive amounts. So they basically are breeding thousands upon thousands of these crabs to unleash them to go out and start
eat, boys.
feeding on this algae and hopefully opening this back up again. Now, what I thought was also fun about this article too, and as always, we always have links to these articles in the show notes, is apparently because they're breeding so many of these in captivity.
Yes.
They are not necessarily automatically know how to handle predators.
Oh.
So to help out with that, they have been using puppets. They're getting local school kids to create puppets because these crabs
like the bad guy?
can't really see very well anyway.
Yeah.
Basically creating puppets of like squids and other predatory fish or whatever that might try to feed on crabs. And they're creating these hand puppets that their people go in and like stick into tanks or whatever.
You're serious
kind
right
of poke
now.
at the fish. And make or poke at the crabs and make them back off, so that they recognize what a predator might look like or might feel like or whatever and stay away from it. So when they get out there, they can avoid predators and get onto their algae.
This is deep.
They thought through all of this.
They thought through all of it. Yeah.
So there you go. Crabs are going to save our coral reefs and maybe even the world. Who knows?
Who knew?
That's what's TEConnecting with us today.
Good stuff.
Mark Middendorf, Andy Scherz, thank you guys so much for joining us on the pod. We appreciate having you. Hey, until next time, go out, get some people talking about their labels.
Yes.
Get some color
go find some opportunities. Absolutely. Go to a brewery.
And the next time you see a crab, thank it. Maybe before you eat it. I don't know.
There you go.
And as always, folks, please stay connected. TEConnect Podcast is brought to you by Epson. All right, Dean, now that we've sold everybody on the benefits of in-house color label printing.
Yes, sir.
Let's discuss how an Epson printer can get the job done for your customers.
Well, I hope they have an option for us, yes.
It'd be a shame if they talk about all that and we're like, oh, sorry.
We don't have anything for you. Yeah.
Oh, of course not. The ColorWorks CW-C4000 is a powerful and compact, on-demand commercial color inkjet label printer. Try saying that 20 times.
Yeah, nice.
Engineered by Epson for demanding applications and backed by industry-leading service and support. The C4000 delivers exceptional, crisp, photo-quality images up to 1200 DPI resolution. It's compatible with ZPL2, major middleware, SAP, Windows, Mac, and Linux for seamless integration, and features a dust and water-resistant design for high-duty cycle environments.
Nice stuff.
Remember how we talked about like show not tell on this thing?
Right, yes.
You show this off and you're going to impress some people. About
absolutely. You see the quality of this thing, it'll knock you out.
Exactly. Low cost, optional Wi-Fi connectivity, remote printer management, speeds up to 4 inches per second, and easy to operate with a color LCD screen and fast media and ink loading. If on-demand in-house color labeling is in your customer's agenda, and it probably should be,
yes,
the ColorWorks CW-C4000 is ready for the job. Check out the link in the show notes for a spec sheet and additional details. TEConnect Podcast is also brought to you by Zebra. It's a rugged tablet.
Yes.
It's a rugged laptop.
Yes.
It's a rugged vehicle mount mobile computer.
Holy moly. All in one?
Everything you need, all in one tablet.
There you go.
No, it's not the latest comic book you read.
The all-in-one.
Tablet man. It's Zebra's ET60 and ET65 tablets, the most versatile Android business tablets. These tablets thrive virtually anywhere, from the harsh environments in warehouses and manufacturing plants to the unpredictable outdoor ports, yards, and field services. It might even survive Arizona.
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
Mark was.
Yes, 100 degrees, no problem. No problem.
Super bright 1,000 nit display for any lighting, outdoor or indoor. New patent-pending vehicle dock with heated keyboard or friction hinge keyboard accessory. Wi-Fi 6E and 5G connectivity. 8 years of service and support lifecycle.
Did you just say 8 years?
8 years.
Holy moly.
Who guarantees anything for 8 years
right?
anymore?
That's solid right there.
That's impressive.
That's impressive.
Check out the link in the show notes to learn more and find helpful sales resources. The TEConnect Podcast is also brought to you by ELO and the 70 series full HD professional grade touch monitors. The 70 series delivers professional grade feature rich platforms well suited for POS, interactive digital signage, self-service document signing, and more. All right, let's talk about some features.
We
love talking features.
We like features.
You got a narrow border touchscreen.
That's important.
He wants a big clunky.
No, you don't want
border.
It's not sleek. It's not sexy.
Energy Star 8.0 certified.
Ooh, okay.
Saving
Saving some energy.
Some of that ESG standard
That's
stuff
right.
we were talking about there.
Yep.
Scratch-resistant surface. Durable IK07 design. Low blue light and flicker-free. Touch on-screen display. Display tilt from 20 to 70 degrees. Built-in speakers and a collapsible stand for visa mounting.
What more do you need?
I don't know. They got it all covered. But hang on. Wait.
Wait.
There's more. Available in 22, 24, and now 27-inch sizes in black or white housings. The 70 series delivers the quality and reliability you expect from ELO, backed with a standard 3-year warranty, extendable to 5 years with optional advanced replacement.
Boom.
Check out the link in the show notes to learn more about these new models.